Hey there. Are you curious about the mysteries of the extraordinary? Do you believe in near-death experiences, supernatural encounters, and other intriguing phenomena? If you do, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Strange Stories, where we dive into the captivating world of the unknown and uncover real-life accounts of these extraordinary events. From near-death experiences to supernatural encounters, we bring you the most intriguing stories from around the world. Imagine being able to escape the mundanity of everyday life and dive into a world of mystery and intrigue. Imagine being able to understand more about the experiences of those who've had a glimpse of the other side. Imagine being a part of a community of like-minded individuals who share your curiosity and desire to know more. Don't miss out on this opportunity to join us on this journey. Hit the subscribe button now and let us explore the strange and extraordinary together. And if you enjoy the content, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. See you on the other side. Following a hysterectomy, I was anxious about sleeping and felt physically vulnerable. I had moved to a spare room to avoid being disturbed by my 22-month-old daughter, who insisted on sleeping in the same bed as my husband and me in the middle of the night. The twin bed was directly against the window leading onto our front porch, and I kept dreaming that someone was breaking in and I was too weak to defend myself. I had a lucid dream about 7 to 10 days after the surgery in which my body rose from the bed and floated around the house. It was as if there was a current of water about 4 feet above the ground, and I was floating on my back in it. I decided to go back to bed after being carried out of my room and around the house, feet first. I did this by grabbing the walls and doorways and pulling myself against the stream, head first, back to the bed. When I got to the doorway, there was no longer any current. Instead, I was floating in space. To get back to my bed, I had to use a combination of swimming motions and bouncing off of walls and furniture. I also had to try several times to get the velocity right so I didn't bounce away again. I eventually came to a halt just above my bed, but I couldn't get back down there. I stayed about a foot or two above the bed. It felt like I was floating on water. Then I started climbing. A wall of mist gathered around me, making it impossible for me to see anything. Least of all that I was ascending, even though I was certain that I was. It felt rather like being on an elevator. I thought to myself, oh great, I'm dreaming about an NDE. And it's so hokey. A tunnel of light. How corny. Can't I be more original? I had a moment of unease, so I wondered why I was dreaming of an NDE. I became positive that I was in fact dying, and I wondered why. For my surgery had been uncomplicated and I was physically fine. I had a flash of thinking that I had asked for it. I had been feeling suicidal and imagining it a few days before the surgery, partly because of job stress-related depression and partly because of taking steroids to get rid of poison ivy before the surgery. As I continued to rise, a defiant feeling came over me. God will not hold that against me. Then I told myself firmly, God is not like that. God is love. Then the rising ceased. The tunnel opened into a cloudy plain. It was bright and featureless except for a floor and ceiling of fluffy clouds. The floor and ceiling appeared to curve together in the middle distance. It was enclosed in a large empty space. But it was not a void. It felt friendly and safe. It felt good there. I had no physical pain. In fact, I was unaware of my body. I ventured a mental inquiry. Am I alone here? Welcome, little one, said a mellifluous, deep voice with feminine overtones. I felt surrounded by love, understanding, and comfort. I needed to cry. I wanted to run over to embrace whoever was speaking, but no one was visible. I had the impression that there was an invisible door off in the mist through which the voice spoke from the outside. I had the impression that I was in a vestibule or narthex outside of a sanctuary or temple, possibly just outside heaven itself. I didn't feel barred from entering, but I was curious if I needed permission. The voice then said, "You may stay if you wish." I reasoned, this is insane. Why would I choose to leave now that I've finally gotten away from the pain and struggles of Earth, and without having to do it myself? Suddenly, I was reminded of my daughter. She was precious and adorable, and I had a deep affection for her. I was curious to see how she turned out. I wished to be there to protect and educate her. I didn't want to abandon her. Then I saw my 5-year-old son, and while I didn't feel as strongly about him, I felt I owed him better than abandoning him. I felt bad about wanting to die. I felt even worse when I saw my husband and realized I was leaving him with 2 small children to care for while he finished his PhD. I imagined him having to leave the parsonage and wondered how he'd handle it. When my gaze returned to my daughter, I was feeling guilty, a little afraid of being drawn in by my guilt, and then a little resentful about it. I was certain that I had been born to bring her into the world and raise her. I had the impression that we'd made a pact with God. I felt that if I chose to break the covenant, God would accept and forgive me, but I didn't want to do that to my daughter. We almost seemed to have a mission, it seemed to me. And my husband, son, and I had tasks to complete together, such as learning and preparing for something that wasn't necessarily something we'd all do together. I knew I had to learn from them, and I knew I had to be a catalyst for them. I still felt guilty for not loving any of them enough, especially my son and especially my husband. But I also knew that I was doing the best I could. I had an indulgent feeling from God, and that there was nothing to forgive in God's eyes. And I realized that I could either stay where I was or go back and strive to do better. I discovered that I wanted to return for my daughter, son, and husband, and at that moment, I began dropping rapidly and breathtakingly. I sat up, but when I got to the end of the tunnel, I saw myself lying on the bed. I flipped onto my back and settled gently into my body on the bed, using a floating leaf maneuver. I reasoned, now hurry up. Remember this dream when you wake up. That's when I realized I was already awake and scanning the room. I wasn't afraid of the window any longer. I knew I'd be here until I finished my mission. I felt as if I'd been given a choice between life and death, and that I had chosen life. I knew I'd have the strength and resources to deal with it. I knew I was a volunteer for this life because I did request to be born. I became intensely curious as to why and for what. Oddly, even though I chose to return for my daughter, son, and husband, I didn't appreciate them any more after a day or two. But I did appreciate life more, and I was no longer as angry about how bad it is, nor as angry and impatient with God about it as I'd been. That's what drove me to seminary. I became more insistent in demanding that parishioners step up to the plate and work for a better world. I wasn't content to simply love and coddle them. I believed it was our responsibility to make the world a better place. This eventually led to a schism with that congregation, though I worked for another 5 years to bring them a vision and a way to bring that vision to fruition. When I resigned, a vacancy appeared that was ideal for our family, so I stayed in the ministry, believing that God orchestrated the vacancy to keep me in the ministry, and in the healing group I had discovered in the meantime, in a sort of spiritual underground right in the midst of a conservative rural community. I'm not sure what to do now that my husband has finally finished his dissertation. I'd like to be able to describe God as I know him, as healing energy and a loving mind. I yearn to be a part of a more liberal and enlightened community.